Mike has donated 4 $50 bills that we are going to draw for at the end of his program today. We'll draw 4 cards out. Whoever's cards we pull out will get a $50 bill from Mike. Your cards will go back in and be eligible for the state drawings at the end of the business today. So that's why it's important that everybody have your cards in here, and we go from there. Real quick, I want to introduce Mike. Mike and I are good friends. Mike is a retired New York City police officer, and if you ever want to go to New York City, this is the tour guide to take. But Mike came out of he was received a disability from NYPD and went to law school, and he has now dedicated his life to victims of crime, especially police officers. And he has done a lot of work for police officers across the state and the Midwest. I know he was in Colorado and Wyoming this week working on an injured officer out there. But it's like labor services that President Francavilla has pushed on, and all of us have. If you are injured, you have a workman's comp, anything like that, get the legal advice that you need, and if you call me and ask me for my recommendation, I'm going to tell you to go to Mike Dyer. So with that, Mike, and remember, at the end of this, we'll draw 4 names, and I'm going to ask Roger and Frank to draw those 4 names at the end of the day. And if you aren't here, you don't get it, and whoever name is drawn, if you're not here, you want to redraw for it, or we'll donate it to a charity, your choice.
We draw so whoever's in the room gets
We'll draw it till we get somebody in the room. So if you want to be here at the end. Michael, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Little incentive so everybody will stick around for my speech. And I really do have it, so somebody's going to win. What I've done is, with the presentation is already on everybody's table, so I'm trying to make this information as available. And can you hear me? Okay, thank you. What I'm trying to do is make this information as readily available to everybody as I can. There's an article that's been published in 4 or 5 different magazines throughout the state with troopers and sheriffs and FOP and the Shield, and a version of that is on the table there. It gives you kind of an outline of what I'm going to talk about. And because I've spoken a couple of times before and I really appreciate being invited back again, I didn't want to give the same talk again. So I wanted to break it up and do just a different approach with it. As we're going through this, if you have questions and you want to stop and ask me something, please do that. All right? The approach I wanted to take is based on the approach that I used from my book. And this is 7 common mistakes that can destroy your workers' comp case. I brought a case of them over. If you want to grab a handful for the people you work with, it's a good guideline to be able to know at least what your workers' comp rights are. All right? And they're on the table over there, distribution table. If you want to get a hold of me, you've got the that article there. You'll have the book. The reason I collected the cards is because I'm having this recorded. I'm going to put it on YouTube, and they can only put it in, I think, 15-minute segments, so maybe 1 or 2 different pieces. And I'll email everybody the link so you can do whatever you want to, so the people in your lodges will be able to have access to it. If you look at the website on the sleeve, it's called hurtcop.com, and that comes to my website. And hopefully I'll have this presentation up there in the next couple of weeks. I don't do the IT stuff, so relying on everybody else's hopefully shouldn't take too long. And Steve doesn't do my IT stuff. He's coming here to help me. So the approach I wanted to take was mistakes, common mistakes. What are the common mistakes cops make when they get hurt? One thing is workers' compensation, people don't realize, is actually the law. And workers' compensation is part of the statute. So one thing, at least I appreciated when I was a cop, is the overtime statutes that said if you worked so many hours over 40 hours, you got paid time and a half for those hours afterwards. It's a law. It's on the books. Nobody questions that that's what happens. You work 44 hours, you're going to get 46 hours of pay. The same set of books on a different page is the workers' comp laws. This isn't a gift. This isn't a handout. This isn't a charity. It's statutory law, and it tells exactly what you're entitled to. When you get into that, there's a couple of other common mistakes that cops don't know about. One, I spoke at the Pavilion a couple months ago, that kind of jumped out was that there are no out-of-pocket expenses if you have a workers' comp case. People are reluctant to go to the doctor because they wonder what their copay is going to be, what their deductible is going to be. If you have an injury in workers' comp and you have to go to the doctor, and we're going to talk a little later about who the doctor is that you should go to, it doesn't cost you a nickel. And they have to pay you mileage from where you're starting to the treatment and back. And right now it's 55 cents a mile. Doesn't add up to a lot if you're really close, but if you're going to physical therapy 3 or 4 times a week for 12 to 15 weeks or years, it can add up to quite a bit. Another mistake, and I'm going to cover quite a bit. Were there any questions at this point about where we're at with mileage? Basic concepts? Good? Just jump in anytime. All right. Another mistake that I see quite a bit is when you say you're okay when you're really injured. Now, when you're in an incident and you're doing police work and the adrenaline is running and you've got the lights and sirens on and you go to an incident and you start to get hurt or whatever, you have to be 100%. We know that. When I was in the academy about 30 years ago, the one lesson that they taught us was that you're not allowed to lose. Right? So you're going to do whatever you can to make sure that one rule is always applied. You're not allowed to lose. So you can't be hurt when you're in the middle of that incident. But when the incident is over, then you're not allowed to have the superpowers that you've had. Okay? You can't just drive your car as fast as you want, lights and sirens, unless you have a reason to. If there was a use of force, it's neutralized. Whatever acceleration comes back down. And what needs to happen at this point is a conscientious transformation. The person, the cop who is out there, whose job it is to run towards the bullets when everybody is running away. Somebody calls for help, you're the one who goes in. That's what we all took this job for. Once that stops, every cop has got the same rights as every other citizen in Nebraska. Because you put your hand up and you took an oath, doesn't mean you surrendered those rights of every other citizen in this state. So it kind of reverts back to every other worker. And there's a real disconnect that people have who do police work. Because you're the first responder, you're the person who's going to come in there and put your life on the line, run into something when everybody's running away. You're not wanting to admit, because you're the provider of help, that you need help. There's a real reluctance by a hurt cop to acknowledge that they're even hurt. And that's the fiber of being a cop. Now, everybody in this room is here because you, for the most part, all the sworn officers, because you decided you wanted to be a cop. You wanted to be deputy, police officer, doing what you're doing to be a member of this unit. And not only did you take it as a job, but everybody in this room has been voted to be here by the members of your lodge, the guys and gals you work with, because they know you're the go-to person. And they know that each one of you people have gone out of your way to help another cop, to help another deputy, police officer. Right? That's what you're here for. This is a fraternity. It doesn't matter if you go to Washington, if you go to New York, if you go to any of the national events that are around there, you start talking cop talk to another cop, and it doesn't matter where they're from, you got a brotherhood. You're driving down the street and you see some cop rolling on the ground, I don't think there's a person in this room who wouldn't stop and get into it with them, even if you're old and out of shape like I am, right? I mean, this is who we are. Now, because this is a fraternity, and because we are elected, the people here are elected and have kind of an elected obligation in a sense to be able to reach out and bring something back to your members. You want to consider that the cops who you work with are not going to be really wanting to reach out to you and not really want to ask for that help. There was an expression that we had in New York. I was in the Special Operations Division. In the Tactical Patrol, there was another part that was emergency service. They used to say that when the public needs help, they dial 911. When the cops need help, they call emergency service. And you guys here are the emergency service, because the cops are not going to want to help themselves. Now, I've repeated this 3 or 4 different ways for a reason, because it's making sense and I can see it kind of setting in. And because if you don't start to peel back that onion and start to talk to somebody who's been hurt, they're never going to get the treatment that they need. When you see somebody who's hurt and they've been in an event, you've been through some terrible events, a lot of guys. You never want to show a sign of weakness because you've gotten through it. Some people, life-threatening. But when we're through that event, then it's time to ask what's wrong. It's time for somebody to pull that cop aside and talk to them like a brother or a sister. To talk to them the way only one cop can talk to another cop. And that's to say, hey, really, do you feel as good as you did the day before you got hurt? And as somebody starts to go through that process and say, okay, I'm not asking you how you feel, because if you ask a judgment question like that, you don't want to feel like a whiner or a complainer. But you want to approach it and say, hey, do you feel as good as you did the day before? And if the guy says, well, I'm kind of sore, you need to peel that onion back with them so that then when they do report this, when they do go to their doctor, they lay out all the things that are going wrong with them. And they don't then get a complaint like, well, maybe you hurt yourself someplace else. So they say, well, well, my neck's a little sore. What part of your neck? Okay, tell me about that. And just in conversation, okay, so your neck hurts. Is your shoulder okay? How about your mid-back? And you can do this kind of a conversation conversationally. And if they're not hurt, great, you're not hurt. But are you feeling different? And if you are feeling different, you need to report it. Because if you wait a week or a month or 6 months and you say, hey, that shoulder that I hurt when I was rolling with that bad guy is now stiffening up, it's not going to be covered. They're going to say, well, you have to prove that you were hurt in the course and scope of employment. So the quicker you can make that report and make the connection that it's a work-related injury, the better off you're going to be. One technique that kind of helps when you're talking to people who are hurt, who don't want to make a big deal about it because, we're cops and, that's part of the job, right? Isn't that and I'll get into that in a minute. Well, I'll get into it right now, I guess. Being hurt is not part of the job. Okay, being hurt is something in addition to police work. If you're hurt, the laws give you these protections and rights. Okay, doing your job is doing your job. Again, night differential, you do these things for working middle of the night, holidays and things like that. That's great, but your job is to do police work, not to be hurt by somebody. And if you look at a cruiser that gets hit by a drunk driver, and how many of those, does anybody not know a cop who got hit by a drunk driver in this room? All right? And big police cars say police right on the side, and they're just, you look at the back of a police car, and when somebody starts to make an assessment, they look at the tail light, they look at the fender, they look at the paint job, and they say, well, they maybe 2 or 3 pages of damages that were done. And they say, this is what the bill is to fix that cruiser. Well, if you don't do that with the cop, if the cop doesn't go in there with that list of what's wrong, and it's not about whining, it's about what's really hurt. And if you leave something off that list, it's not going to be covered. So you want to compare yourself and say, what's more important, a cruiser or a cop? And I'm just trying to give you techniques and things to be able to have in the back of your mind to be able to throw out later on if you do talk to somebody who's kind of resistant and reluctant to be able to exercise their own rights. Okay. Another mistake. Does anybody know what a workers' comp impairment rating is? Okay, it's one of those things that people think they have a really good understanding of. And there's certain charts, and sometimes you can take care of these on your own, but sometimes you can't. Now, depending on the part of your body, if you hurt an extremity, a scheduled member, that's your shoulder on down, your legs on down, you have a different rate of 225 weeks for your shoulder, 150 from your elbow down, or 175 weeks from your elbow down, and your leg is 215 weeks. All these little parts of your body can be scheduled members. You just go to a doctor, you get a percentage, and you plug in the numbers, and you come up with a dollar amount. If you have an injury to your spine, if you have a neck injury, a back injury, closed head injury, it's called a body as a whole injury. Okay, and parts of your hip depending on how that's hurt. The percentage that the doctor gives you, a 5% injury to your spine, is irrelevant. It doesn't matter because it's a body as a whole. The only thing that they're going to look at, or should look at if they're going to do it right, is your loss of earning. And if you're a cop and you've got a permanent injury to your back, and if you use the right, the vocational rehabilitation counselors are part of the court system. What they'll do is they're appointed to take a look at you and your limitations that you might have. They'll factor in that police work is heavy work, and you might not be able to do that kind of heavy work. Now, to get to that point of having a loss of earning evaluation, if you have a spinal injury, you need to consider getting a functional capacity evaluation. Now, am I losing pretty much the whole room at this point? Good. All right. So you've been hurt, your back is hurt, you get ready to be released from your spine doctor because your neck or your back, and he says, okay, well, you're almost ready to go. You want to ask the doctor to get a functional capacity evaluation. That's a test done by a physical therapist. It'll take anywhere from 3 to 8 hours to complete. And they'll do bending, lifting, stooping, and they have tests in there for integrity to see if you're faking, pushing, or what you're doing. And then they'll evaluate your limitations and put it into a chart. After you have that scientific documentation of what your limitations are, a vocational rehabilitation counselor will visit with you about your age, your education, your skills, your training, your experiences doing police work, and how those limitations affect that. And if you, instead of having a 5% to your spine, you could have substantially higher. And I say substantially higher because I'm not going to throw a number out. It could be anywhere. I've seen them as high as 45%. I've seen them as low as 10%. But it's more important because you're losing your ability to earn an income and do police work. That's more important than what the number is in the book. So just something to bear in mind. Another mistake. And I talked to somebody recently about this mistake. It's neglecting your own case because cops don't take care of themselves. Because we're always wanting to take care of somebody else, and we're the last people to take care of ourselves. Neglecting the case means quite a few things. If you're hurt, you go to your doctor. If you're hurt, you follow the doctor's instructions. If you had a surgery on your shoulder, on your whatever part of your back, knees, whatever it is, the probability that you're going to have arthritis as you get a little older and you start to get gray hair, it's going to be there. And that's for the cops who still have a chance of keeping their case alive and going. Because sometimes, and I was talking to somebody recently about this, that they allow too much time to go in between treatment. Now, if workers' comp requires that you do not have, it's a 2-year statute of limitations, which means that you do not have a period of 2 years where the defendant, department, workers' comp, doesn't pay a bill. So if you hurt your shoulder 8-9 years ago, and you went to the doctor for the first 5 years, and then you took 2 years off, and you decide to go to trial, you lose. Even though your doctor said, well, you're probably going to need this, it's definitely going to come up, you're going to have this surgery. If you allow a 2-year gap in treatment to exist, you lose. So neglecting the case is something that, we're not babysitters, okay? I'm not asking you for your benefit or for the people you work with in your lodge. But it's nice to be able to kind of have a reminder of, hey, if you have an injury and you haven't been to the doctor and it's coming close to 2 years and you're still having a problem, go to your doctor. Because once you lose that, if you have to have a shoulder surgery, you're going to have your copay and deductible for what, $15,000, $20,000. You're going to be out of work for 3 months, not line of duty. I mean, it's an avoidable problem.
Mike, along that line, you've gone through you're as good as you're going to get. The case has been settled. The injury comes back. Is that because, specifically let's talk about my case. You get
Hypothetically.
Hypothetically.
Yes.
After 4 or 5 years, that injury is back.
Right.
Is that still covered under workman's comp, or is that a new one?
Well, that's a great question. You can answer it both ways. Now, if you're having pain, now the departments for the most part are not going to settle a case because you're all working for the department still. So you're going to get paid out for a number of weeks. After that payment ends, if you have another payment for a prescription, for a doctor bill, that will add 2 more years from there. Okay, but if you stop going to the doctor for a period of years, and then all of a sudden you wake up and you've had like 3 or 4 years with no payment from the city by anything, you own it. But if you aggravate that pre-existing condition, and your doctor is willing to document that yes, you did have this condition, yes, you reached maximum medical improvement, but because you were wrestling with the bad guy and aggravated that, it's flared it up and now you need a surgery, that's possible to get that accomplished. That's option B. Because if you allow that 2 years to fill in, now you're fighting an uphill battle. Now you need a doctor to be able to say, yes, we recognize all these defenses, yes, these happen, except in this case, you aggravated it doing something else. And it's possible to get there, but I'd rather not fight that fight if I don't have to. If your doctor says, hey, you're on a medication for inflammation, and you need to go back and get the prescription filled every 6 months, and you go to the doctor, and the city, in your case, pays for it, fill a prescription, whatever, you just keep it going as long as you can, possibly. But if you have another incident at work, and you're reluctant to report it, and it's to the same part of your body, but you're thinking, well, I already settled that case. No, that's a new injury, and they owe you for treatment. Now, they may not owe you for a higher impairment rating because you've already been labeled that, unless you're hurt significantly worse. But who wants to pay copays and deductibles? Just because you have a pre-existing condition from a work comp injury doesn't mean you can't aggravate it and get treated again. Anybody else on that before we switch to a different subject? Did I answer you okay, Mark?
It does, thank you.
Okay. The other thing is when if I sit down and talk to a cop about what's going on with an injury, and we start going through a history of what they've gone through, I can't tell you how many people had a shoulder surgery or a knee surgery, doctor released them and then they left and that was it. And they didn't know that they were entitled by law, if the doctor gave an impairment rating, to disability, permanent partial disability payments. It happens. And because nobody wants to make a big stink about these kinds of things, nobody wants to act hurt because, police, they're reluctant to make a big stink about it, and they may not even know to do that. And it's not a matter of a stink, it's a matter of what the law is. And it's easier for you as the lodge representatives to talk to somebody about this, and a lot less easy than an injured cop, because everybody's probably had some sort of a line of duty injury. and nobody wants to feel like they're making a big deal about themselves. Getting back again with the with the other reasons for wanting to continue with your arthritis and things like that. Anybody ever know of somebody who's had a surgery on a shoulder or need another one 10, 20 years later? Anybody not? It's just pretty common. Here's another one I like. You can trust your insurance company, or you can trust the workers' comp provider, and that's a mistake. And kind of going to unpack that a little bit. One reason, starting off, is all insurance is the same, no matter what kind of insurance you have, except workers' comp has a specific exclusion that they don't have to treat you fair. The Supreme Court in Nebraska ruled that there is no bad faith claims that can be brought against a workers' comp carrier, which means they're allowed to lie to you. They're allowed to not tell you things. Okay, ringing any bells about how police work works? Okay, this is kind of biting us back. And if they do these things and they don't tell you the truth and they don't do your case properly, you don't have a case against them for bad faith. Here's the kind of things that they don't do right. They don't do the math right. Now, the statute says it's 2/3 of your average weekly wage. What's an average weekly wage? Overtime, is that counted? If you took a couple of weeks off and you didn't have enough lost time and they deducted it, are they going to average it straight out? I'd say more than half the time, workers' comp carriers get the numbers wrong. They don't count in what your actual pay is. If you're working at night and you're getting a night differential, you get paid for that. If you work overtime, you don't get paid the time and a half, but if you average in 50, 60 hours a week, you don't get paid for the 40 hours. And if you have an extraordinarily low week, where if you only had 10 hours of you used all your time, you had to take 10 hours lost, you kick that out. And there's some other fundamental things, but that's one of the techniques that they use, is they just don't figure the numbers out. So if you use a lower number and you plug in a percentage, they're going to pay less. Insurance companies hire people to reduce their expenses. And anybody here ever gone through a hail claim? Okay, living in Nebraska. Anybody here said to the adjuster who came out to their house, "That's too much money, I can't accept that," right? They have a job. All insurance is the same. It's to save the insurance company money. Now, what they do in one technique is they use certain doctors who market to the insurance carriers. These doctors market themselves as being able to save the insurance company money, okay, which is what the goal of the nurse case manager is, to save the insurance company money. I was in workers' comp, had a seminar in the workers' comp court about 12, 15 years ago, I guess. And an insurance executive from a major workers' comp carrier stood up in front of a room full of nurse case managers and said the reason, and I was in there because I kind of wanted to find out what the other side was thinking, and they said the reason you're all hired here is to save us money. Now, there's doctors that market to the insurance companies, and they say that they are going to get the employees back to work faster and cheaper. Two identically injured people. Identically injured. One goes back to work in 3 days and doesn't get an MRI. The other guy does. Okay, how does that work? Is one guy faking? Or maybe is the doctor just trying to save some money? The only money that they can save is money that an injured cop would have gotten in benefits or treatment. And when you look at it from that perspective, you think, now, would anybody take their car to a body shop if you had hail damage and they said, "We can paint your car for $199.99? Huh? There's suspect. Spidey senses. Oh, you're police. There's something wrong with that. And there is, right? Because you're saying, how could that happen? But you go to the doctors that the insurance company tells you to go to, and you're more important than that car. And that's the same premise. And then how many guys call me after they've been all done with this stuff and they're disappointed in the outcome and they're not done, and they sign a Form 50 that says, I'll see the company doctor, and then they're disappointed 2 or 3 months later. Now, Form 50 is a form that should be provided to you by your employer when you get hurt. And it specifically asks you who your provider is going to be. And if the nurse case manager or your workers' comp people are polite enough to fill in their doctor's name, okay, to try and speed things along because you're hurting, cross it out. Don't sign it. Put your own doctor in. Your own doctor knows you. It's not a matter of getting 1 nickel more than you're entitled to, but you should be treated fair by your own doctors. 10 minutes? Okay. And it goes even further than this, and because of client confidentiality, I'm going to be vague about these particulars. I worked with a police officer who was getting the real short end of a stick and didn't like the way things were going with the case. And this police officer decided to investigate the claims adjuster and found out there was 2 drunk driving convictions that this person had, and wondered, do you think that they don't like cops? We're dealing with the general public. We're dealing with people who bring their own baggage, and the insurance adjuster is your opponent. And everybody's got to account to somebody and be able to justify reasons to be promoted, reasons to get a raise, to save the insurance company money, therefore making a bigger profit and getting a larger profit share. And again, it's not a matter of getting 1 nickel more than you want, than you're entitled to, but get what you are entitled to. Another mistake. Yes?
How does the Family Medical Leave Act interact with workers' comp? And here's a question. I had a shoulder injury. I needed surgery, and I was going to be off for 6 weeks. The city's HR director calls me and sends me notification saying, we're putting you on FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act, and if you can't come back in 11 weeks, we can replace your position.
Right.
You're done. So how does that, and she said, not that we would,
right,
but we can.
Yeah, that happens all the time. You want to try and stay away from that Family Medical Leave Act as long as you can, but if they decide that they want to implement that, they can, and they can fire you.
So they can just tell you that as soon as you're off work, they just send you a notification saying you're on Family Medical Leave Act.
Right.
And after 11 weeks, they can replace your position.
Well, there's 2 different things going on. One is you'll be paid by workers' comp 2/3 of your average weekly wage because they don't have employment suitable for you with your restrictions. Secondly, yes, the Family Leave Act, the Family Medical Leave Act, if that kicks in after that period of time, then you have to go back to your union protections that you have in your contract. But this is a right to work state, and without the specific provisions that might be able to protect you, it happens an awful lot. People get hurt, the employer says Family Medical Leave Act, they get done with it, and they say, sorry, we don't have a job for you. And, you want to try and get, I don't know what the collective bargaining agreements that you have, but that would be the next fallback. I know, it's a bitter pill.
That's something that I never knew.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing for the guys in this room to know. If you get hurt and your city wants to, your employer wants to, they can just send you this and say, we're putting you on it. I thought it was an employer's decision to take that.
It's a discretionary position to be able to make you fill that out. And some departments will have you off for a year or 2 if they can do that, depending on the department policy, depending on your agency.
Well, they didn't. They sent me the papers.
Right.
And I didn't fill them out, but they just unilaterally said, we're charging this against FMLA. We don't care if you filled it out or not.
Right. They can do that.
And they can do that.
But if they choose to do that, they can do that. It doesn't happen in every case. I'm not saying it's right.
Well,
I'm just saying it is.
I can tell you that HR directors work for 2 different entities now, and now I'm an administrator who had guys off, and the HR director at the county tells me, as soon as these guys are off, you need to send them this letter. And I've resisted doing it, and then I got in trouble for it.
Well, and that subject,
policy.
That's an employment issue, and that's a completely different subject if we start to unpack that, and I've got about 3 or 4 minutes to touch I'm just discussing the workers' comp aspect of how that applies. Can they do that in short? Yes, they can. Are there things you can do about it? That's, an employment question that would need to be answered. And we can certainly talk about it a little bit later. But yes, thanks for bringing that up. Another mistake. If you get bit by a dog, is it covered? Yes. In the state of Nebraska, you do not get a free bite. If somebody's dog bites you, you get to sue them, and the homeowner's insurance, apartment owner's insurance, if they have that, will cover it. And it's strict liability. It's not a question of if they owe you, it's a matter of how much they owe you. If you get a little scratch and you don't want to put a claim in, that's good. You get a chunk taken out of you or you need stitches and you're going weeks in pain, that's not part of the job you put your hand up to be able to do. Okay, that's extra. And somebody should pay for that. The other part we get into is coverage. Automobile insurance. And here's something the last lodge I talked to didn't know about this. Does everybody in this room know that if you're hurt on duty in a cruiser and you do not have enough, the person who hit you has no insurance or not enough insurance to protect you, your own personal car insurance steps in? Meaning, God forbid you're that trooper just got hit head on by the 17-year-old. Okay, we don't know when that's going to happen. Everybody here puts body armor when you go on the street. We have no idea what the future is going to hold, but you're out on the road when it's snowy, when everybody else is home. Okay, with the drunks out at night. I mean, I represent dozens of cops who've been hit by drunk drivers. And it's incredible, the level of exposure that cops have to being hurt while they're in a cruiser. As of this morning, there's been 34 line of duty deaths in the United States. 13 of them involved motor vehicles. Okay, and how many people know cops who were hurt in car crashes? So, I do that to people. If you have a terrible crash, okay, God forbid you need to have a spinal surgery, and you have no insurance on the person, or very little insurance on that person, and your case is worth $200,000. If you had a significant policy, and it's not that much to have the right kind of policy, a $500,000 policy for what cops are doing is probably an appropriate amount. Okay, then you can get that collecting it from your own car insurance. And when you collect it from your own car insurance, you do not have to pay workers' comp back, because that's not part of something that they get their money back from. They get their money back in subrogation from the at-fault driver. So the one life insurance policy that cops can collect on, and probably, with probabilities of exposure to risk, would be that car insurance. And it's something that's easily, because people think I got this full coverage. There's no such thing. So whatever you have for policies, if you want to bring something back to your lodge of benefit, that's something you need to be able to say to the guys. There's no such thing as this full coverage. Take a look at the numbers, and if a drunk runs into you and takes your spleen, and you lose, something significant or ability to be able to do something, it's worth $200,000 or $300,000. The policy that your own car insurance would provide would give you that money, and nobody else would have to touch it. Be no payback. And wrapping up, another mistake people make is delaying and looking at your family members' rights and being able to help. The old saying about the shoemakers' kids never have good shoes. I represent quite a few police officers whose fathers have mesothelioma, and they delay and delay and delay. It's a terrible cancer. It's something that a lot of people who've been on Navy's worked around all kinds of asbestos and insulation and other materials gets, and it sits dormant for 15, 30 years, and then the cancer, with terrible outcome, starts to hit the person. And delaying getting that kind of legal assistance right away means that the person who's got this mesothelioma can't benefit from, something that's out there, pool of money that's already set aside for them. We've been able to get some benefits for some people to be able to use, while they can still use the benefits. Everybody saw the FOP magazine that came out last month? Probably, no, the magazine. That was the one that, where is it? It's one of these. This cover, and I didn't shoot all of these, but I shot a lot of these pictures. Part of what I like to do is to help cops to be able to do things that cops can't really get done for themselves. One thing they can't do is take their own picture when they're working. So I've been able to do 4 or 5 drunk driving checkpoints, State Fair, Omaha's opening day with the College World Series, and these pictures that we take, I put up on my Facebook. It means a lot to the families. It means a lot to the cops, but it means a lot to the families, because these are pictures you're never going to see. And if you take a look at the magazine that came out last, nice picture there in the middle. I don't know if you recognize him, but it's something that we do for our families, so that they can see us and be able to appreciate what we're doing. So let me make a couple of offers. One, if you want to play this anytime, I'll send the emails out and you'll have it to be able to put on your website. If you'd like me to come to any part of the state to be able to do a presentation, any lodge, call me anytime. Now, I was in in Wyoming on Monday, and I spent about 4 or 5 hours visiting with a cop who was really hurt and sitting with his wife. And there's some things that take time to be able to unpeel that onion, to be able to have people appreciate what they've done and what they're doing and what they're going through. And I'm willing to put that time in. Somebody's done that for me. Somebody's taken the time to help me. And I'd like to be able to pay that back if I can. So if anybody has any questions, any events that come up, if you want me to come out and photograph them, you drunk driving checkpoint or something like that, just give me a call. I love to do that kind of stuff.
Thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
Real quick, 2 quick announcements. Remember, Mike donated all these shirts to every member, and I'm probably speaking for you, but if we have extras tomorrow after everybody has checked in and that, come see me if we have extras. I'll take them back to your members and give them out.
Absolutely.
One quick announcement, President Villa, we're going to do time certain for nominations at 1 o'clock. As soon as we get those done, we're going to take about a 10 or 15 minute break before we start up with Aaron Hansen about 1:30. So bear with us for a few minutes. We've got to get across the hall and get those done. Brother Mayberry, would you draw the first one?
We're going to ask for your state trustee at that time too from your lot. Make sure you have that ready.
Brenda Anderson. There's one, right? Next, Joey Day. Door home. There he is. Number 2. Brian. Brian, Lodge 2. Where you at, Brian? There you are. Oh, damn, Rusty, isn't that right? Well, I went picking up the airport. Hey, Jimmy. Remember, here's the 4 winners. They're all going right back in. And these will be used for the drawings at the end of the day. Give it up for time Jim, sorry I made that so tight, Russ.